The air in the school auditorium was electric with excitement as the opening night of the annual play reached its climax. Parents and students alike leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the talented young actors bringing the story to life on stage. All except one woman, that is. Karen sat fuming in the back row, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as she glared at the unfolding performance. Her daughter, Brittany, was nowhere to be seen, and Karen was not about to let that injustice stand. She had spent weeks lobbying the drama teacher, Miss Perkins, to give Brittany a leading role, but her pleas have fallen on deaf ears. This is an outrage. Karen hissed to her husband, Joe, who sat uncomfortably beside her. Our daughter is the most talented student in this entire school, and they've relegated her to a meaningless background role. It's a travesty. Joe tried to calm his wife, placing a gentle hand on her arm. Honey, please try to keep it down. This is supposed to be a celebration of the students' hard work. I'm sure Brittany is doing her best, even if it's not in the spotlight. Karen scoffed, shrugging off his touch. Doing her best? Ha, that's not good enough. Brittany deserves the lead role, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. As the play reached its climactic finale, Karen suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Ignoring the disapproving glares from the other parents, she marched down the aisle towards the stage, determination burning in her eyes. Stop the show, she yelled, her voice cutting through the thunderous applause. This is an outrage, and I won't stand for it. The actors froze, the color draining from their faces as they stared at the irate woman storming the stage. The principal, Mr. Simmons, hurried over, his face flushed with alarm. Mrs. Fraser, what is the meaning of this? He demanded. You're disrupting the performance. The meaning of this? Karen spat, her finger jabbing accusingly towards the stage. The meaning is that my daughter, Brittany, the most talented student in this entire school, has been completely overlooked for the lead role. This is an injustice, and I won't stand for it. Mr. Simmons held up his hands, trying to calm the situation. Mrs. Fraser, I understand your concerns, but this is not the appropriate time or place to address them. Please return to your seat, and we can discuss this after the show. Karen's nostrils flared, her eyes narrowing dangerously. Discuss it. There's nothing to discuss. Either you give Brittany the lead role, or I'll see to it that this entire production is shut down. The audience erupted in shocked murmurs, and the actors shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to proceed. Mr. Simmons' expression hardened as he realized the gravity of the situation. Mrs. Fraser, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately, he said sternly. Your behavior is unacceptable and is disrupting the performance. If you refuse to cooperate, I will have no choice but to call the police. Karen's jaw dropped, and for a moment, she seemed to be at a loss for words. Then, her face flushed with fury, and she pointed an accusatory finger at the principal. This isn't over, Mr. Simmons. Mark my words, you haven't heard the last of me. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the auditorium, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. As the audience exchanged bewildered glances, the actors slowly resumed their performance, the show going on despite the dramatic interruption. The next morning, Karen stormed into the school principal's office, her face flushed with anger. Mr. Simmons looked up from his desk, bracing himself for the onslaught. Mrs. Fraser, I was expecting you, he said calmly. Please, have a seat. Karen ignored the invitation, pacing back and forth in front of the desk. How dare you humiliate me in front of the entire school like that? She spat. Brittany is the most talented student you have, and she deserved that lead role. Mr. Simmons held up a hand, his expression unwavering. Mrs. Fraser, I understand you're upset, but your behavior last night was completely unacceptable. You disrupted the performance and caused a scene in front of the entire audience. That's not the kind of behavior we tolerate at this school. Unacceptable. Karen scoffed. What's unacceptable is the way you've treated my daughter. She's been passed over for lead roles time and time again, and I'm not going to stand for it anymore." The principal sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Mrs. Fraser, the lead roles are awarded based on merit, not parental influence. Brittany was given a supporting role because that's what the director felt was best for the production." Best for the production? Karen's voice rose to a shrill shriek. "What about what's best for my daughter? She's been working tirelessly for years, honing her acting skills, and you're just going to dismiss her like that?" Mr. Simmons held up a hand, his expression hardening. "Mrs. Fraser, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. If you continue to disrupt the school's operations, I will have no choice but to ban you from the campus entirely." Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't do that. I'm a taxpayer, and I have a right to be involved in my child's education." "That may be true," Mr. Simmons replied, "but you've demonstrated a complete disregard for the rules and policies of this institution. Your behavior last night was unacceptable, and I won't tolerate it happening again." Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the principal cut her off. "If you continue to cause a scene or try to interfere with the school's activities, I will have no choice but to take legal action. Do I make myself clear?" Karen's face contorted with rage, but she could see the determination in Mr. Simmons' eyes. Reluctantly, she nodded, turning on her heel and storming out of the office. As the door slammed behind her, Mr. Simmons let out a weary sigh. He knew that this wasn't the last he'd seen of Karen Fraser, and he dreaded the thought of what she might do next. Late of that evening, Karen paced back and forth in her living room, her mind racing with thoughts of revenge. How dare Mr. Simmons threaten to ban her from the school campus? She was Brittany's mother, and she had every right to advocate for her daughter's well-being. This is an outrage, she muttered to herself, pausing to glare out the window. I won't let that pompous principal get away with this. Brittany deserves better, and I'm going to make sure she gets it. Across the room, Joe watched his wife with a growing sense of unease. He knew that look in her eyes all too well. It was the look of a woman on a mission, and there was no stopping her once she got started. Karen? Honey, maybe you should just let this go, he ventured cautiously. I know you're upset, but you can't just barge into the school and start causing trouble. That's not going to help Brittany's situation. Karen whirled around, her eyes narrowing dangerously. Let it go. Are you kidding me, Joe? This is about our daughter's future, and I'm not going to let some petty little bureaucrat stand in her way. Joe sighed, running a hand through his hair. I get that, I really do. But you can't just keep escalating the situation. You need to find a way to work with the school, not against them. Work with them, Karen scoffed. Have you forgotten how they completely dismissed Brittany's talents? No, this is personal now. I'm going to make sure that Mr. Simmons and his precious drama department pay for their incompetence. Before Joe could protest further, Karen had grabbed her car keys and stormed out of the house, leaving him to wonder what on earth she was planning to do. As Karen drove towards the school, her mind raced with 100 different schemes. She knew that she couldn't just barge in and start yelling again. That would only get her banned from the premises for good. No, she needed a more subtle approach, something that would hit the school where it hurt. And then it hit her. The school's annual fundraiser was coming up in a few weeks. If she could somehow sabotage that event, it would cripple the drama department's budget and put a serious dent in their plans for the upcoming year. A sinister grin spread across Karen's face as she pulled into the school parking lot. This was going to be the perfect way to get her revenge on Mr. Simmons and show him that you don't mess with the Fraser family. The next day, Karen arrived at the school, armed with a seemingly innocent proposal. She marched straight into Mr. Simmons' office, a saccharine smile plastered across her face. Good morning, Mr. Simmons, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I wanted to apologize for my outburst at the play the other night. I was just so upset about Brittany being overlooked, but I realize now that I should have handled it in a more constructive manner. Mr. Simmons eyed her warily, unsure of where this was going. I appreciate the apology, Mrs. Fraser. What can I do for you today? Well, I've been thinking a lot about how I can make it up to the school and the drama department, Karen continued, her smile never wavering. And I had an idea that I think could really benefit everyone. The principal leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowing in suspicion. I'm listening. You see, I know how important the annual fundraiser is for the school, and I'd love to help out in any way I can, Karen said, her eyes sparkling with what appeared to be genuine concern. I was thinking that maybe I could take charge of organizing the event this year. I have a lot of experience with event planning, and I'm sure I could help make it the biggest and most successful fundraiser yet. Mr. Simmons couldn't help but feel a little taken aback by Karen's sudden change of heart. That's very generous of you, Mrs. Fraser. But I'm not sure that's the best idea, given the events of the other night. Oh, please, Mr. Simmons, Karen pleaded, leaning forward in her chair. I know I lost my temper, but I promised I'll be on my best behavior. This is my chance to show you and the school how committed I am to supporting Brittany and the drama department. The principal hesitated, weighing the pros and cons of Karen's offer. On one hand, she had caused a significant disruption during the play, and he wasn't sure he could trust her to behave herself. But on the other hand, her involvement could significantly boost the fundraiser's success, and that would be a boon for the school's finances. After a moment of tense silence, Mr. Simmons let out a resigned sigh. All right, Mrs. Fraser, I'll give you a chance. But I want to make it clear that any further outbursts or inappropriate behavior will result in an immediate ban from the school grounds. Do I make myself clear? Karen's eyes lit up with triumph, and she nodded eagerly. Absolutely, Mr. Simmons. You have my word that I'll be on my best behavior. This is going to be the best fundraiser the school has ever seen. You'll see. As she left the principal's office, Karen couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. She had played her cards perfectly, and now she had the perfect opportunity to exact her revenge on Mr. Simmons and the drama department. This was going to be sweet. Over the next few weeks, Karen threw herself into organizing the school's annual fundraiser, determined to make it a rousing success. On the surface, she was the picture of a devoted and hardworking parent, meeting with teachers, coordinating volunteers, and securing high-profile sponsors. But beneath the veneer of her cheerful demeanor, Karen was hatching a sinister plan. She had secretly been in contact with a few disgruntled parents, sowing seeds of discontent and convincing them to boycott the event. Her goal was to ensure that the fundraiser was a dismal failure, thereby crippling the drama department's budget and derailing their plans for the upcoming year. As the big day approached, Karen's excitement grew. She had managed to secure a prime location for the event, and had even convinced a local celebrity to serve as the guest of honor. Everything was falling into place perfectly. The morning of the fundraiser, Karen arrived at the school, a triumphant smile on her face. She had made sure to arrive early to oversee the final preparations, and as she surveyed the bustling scene, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. But as the hours ticked by, Karen's smile slowly started to fade. The crowds were smaller than she had expected, and the donations were not rolling in as quickly as she had hoped. She pulled aside the volunteer coordinator, a concerned look on her face. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Where is everyone? This is supposed to be our biggest fundraiser of the year." The coordinator, a harried-looking woman named Mrs. Jeffries, shrugged apologetically. "I'm not sure, Mrs. Fraser. We've had a lot of last-minute cancellations, and ticket sales have been much lower than expected." Karen's eyes narrowed, and her grip tightened on the clipboard she was holding. "Cancellations? What do you mean?" Mrs. Jeffries hesitated, sensing the tension in Karen's voice. "Well, a lot of parents have said they can't make it due to other commitments. And some local businesses that had promised to sponsor the event have also backed out at the last minute." Karen's heart sank as the realization hit her. Her plan had backfired. The fundraiser was shaping up to be a complete disaster, and it was all her own doing. This can't be happening, she muttered under her breath, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the clipboard. I've worked too hard for this to fail. As the hours dragged on, the fundraiser continued to sputter and struggle. Attendance was dismal, and the donations trickled in at a painfully slow pace. Karen watched in horror as her carefully constructed plan crumbled around her. Finally, as the event drew to a close, Mr. Simmons approached her, a somber expression on his face. Mrs. Fraser, I'm afraid the fundraiser was a complete failure, he said, his voice laced with disappointment. We barely raised a quarter of our target goal. Karen felt her heart drop, and she struggled to maintain her composure. I don't understand. Everything was supposed to go perfectly. How could this have happened? Mr. Simmons eyed her with a mixture of pity and suspicion. I'm not sure, but I have a feeling you might know more about this than you're letting on. Karen's eyes widened, and she cursed herself for not being more careful. She opened her mouth to protest, but the principal cut her off. I think it's best if you don't volunteer for any more school events, Mrs. Fraser. Your involvement has caused enough trouble as it is. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Karen to stew in her own guilt and shame. She had gotten exactly what she deserved, and she knew it. Her quest for revenge had backfired spectacularly, and now she had to face the consequences. The days following the disastrous school fundraiser were some of the most humiliating and stressful that Karen had ever experienced. Word of the event's failure had spread like wildfire through the community, and she found herself the subject of whispers and disapproving glares wherever she went. At home, her husband Joe was utterly furious with her. He had tried to warn her against interfering, but she had refused to listen, and now the family was facing the consequences. I can't believe you did this, Karen, Joe shouted, pacing the living room like a caged animal. How could you be so selfish and short-sighted? You've embarrassed our family and damaged the school's reputation, all because you couldn't accept that Brittany didn't get the lead role. Karen cowered on the couch, her eyes downcast. I'm sorry, Joe. I just wanted to help Brittany get the recognition she deserves. I never meant for things to go this far. Help Brittany? Joe scoffed. You've done the exact opposite. Now the drama department is facing massive budget cuts, and Brittany's chances of ever getting a lead role have been completely ruined. Brittany, who had been sitting silently in the corner, finally spoke up. Dad's right, Mom. I told you to leave it alone, but you just couldn't listen. Now everyone at school is making fun of me, and the teachers won't even look at me anymore. Karen felt her heart shatter at the anguish in her daughter's voice. Brittany, honey, I'm so sorry. I was just trying to. Save it, Mom, Brittany interrupted, her eyes filling with tears. I don't want to hear your excuses. You've humiliated me, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the sound of Brittany's sniffles. Karen sat there, her mind reeling, as the full weight of her actions finally sank in. The next day, Karen found herself summoned to the principal's office once again. This time, however, the atmosphere was decidedly more tense and hostile. Mr. Simmons looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Fraser, I think we need to have a serious discussion about your involvement with the school. Karen swallowed hard, bracing herself for the worst. I know what I did was wrong, Mr. Simmons. I take full responsibility for the failure of the fundraiser, and I'm prepared to face the consequences. The principal nodded, his fingers steepled in front of him. That's good to hear, Mrs. Fraser, because I'm afraid the consequences are quite severe. Karen felt her stomach twist into knots as he continued. Due to the significant financial impact of the failed fundraiser, the school board has decided to make some drastic cuts to the drama department's budget. They've also voted to ban you from participating in any future school events or activities. Karen's eyes widened in horror. What? You can't do that. This is my daughter's school, and I have a right to be involved. Mr. Simmons held up a hand, silencing her. I'm afraid that's not the case, Mrs. Fraser. Your actions have proven that you are unwilling to put the needs of the school and its students ahead of your own personal agenda. As a result, we can no longer trust you to behave in a way that is beneficial to the community. Karen felt the blood drain from her face as the reality of the situation sank in. She had lost everything: her reputation, her influence, and most importantly, her ability to support her daughter's dreams. This isn't over, Mr. Simmons, she whispered, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. I'll fight this, I swear. The principal shook his head, his expression grim. I'm afraid it is over, Mrs. Fraser. If you continue to interfere with the school's operations, I'll have no choice but to take legal action. I suggest you take some time to reflect on your actions and their consequences. With that, Mr. Simmons dismissed her, leaving Karen to stew in her own defeat and despair. As she walked out of the school, she could feel the eyes of the students and faculty burning into her back, a constant reminder of the shame and humiliation she had brought upon herself and her family. In the weeks that followed, Karen's life spiraled into a vortex of resentment and bitterness. She had lost everything: her reputation, her influence, and most importantly, her ability to advocate for her daughter Brittany. The drama department's budget cuts had hit the school's theater program hard, and Brittany's hopes of ever landing a lead role were all but dashed. Karen watched helplessly as her daughter's dreams crumbled before her eyes, and the guilt and shame she felt were almost overwhelming. At home, the tension between Karen and her husband Joe had reached a breaking point. He refused to even speak to her, and Brittany had become increasingly distant, clearly still hurt and embarrassed by the whole ordeal. One evening, as Karen sat alone in her living room, stewing in her own misery, a single thought crystallized in her mind. She had to find a way to make things right. Fueled by a newfound determination, Karen began to plot. She knew that she couldn't simply waltz back into the school and demand that Mr. Simmons reinstate her involvement. That ship had long since sailed. No, she would need to take a more subtle and strategic approach. Over the next few days, Karen reached out to a network of parents and community members, sowing the seeds of discontent. She painted a picture of a school administration that was out of touch, overly rigid, and unwilling to listen to the concerns of the families it served. Slowly but surely, she began to rally support for her cause. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Karen was working tirelessly to uncover any potential weaknesses or vulnerabilities in the school's operations. She pored over financial records, scrutinized policies and procedures, and even went so far as to hire a private investigator to dig up dirt on Mr. Simmons and the school board. As her plan began to take shape, Karen felt a surge of confidence. This was her chance to not only redeem herself, but to exact a measure of revenge on those who had wronged her and her daughter. She was determined to bring the school to its knees, and she would stop at nothing to achieve her goal. One evening, as Karen sat at her computer, meticulously reviewing the information she had gathered, a wicked grin spread across her face. She had found the perfect leverage: a financial irregularity in the school's accounts that could spell disaster for Mr. Simmons and his administration. With a few keystrokes, Karen began to put her plan into motion, confident that this time she would emerge victorious. The days of the school principal and his precious drama department were numbered, and Karen Fraser was going to make sure of it. The tension in the school auditorium was palpable as Principal Simmons stepped up to the podium, his face etched with worry. The normally confident administrator fidgeted nervously, clearing his throat before addressing the gathered parents and teachers. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice wavering slightly. "I've called this emergency meeting because I have some unsettling news to share with you all." Karen, seated in the back of the room, couldn't suppress a triumphant smirk. She knew exactly what was coming, and she relished the opportunity to watch Mr. Simmons squirm. The principal continued, his brow furrowed with concern. "It has come to my attention that there are some irregularities in the school's financial records. Specifically, a significant amount of funds from the drama department's budget appear to have been misappropriated. A collective gasp rippled through the audience, and Karen could see the color drain from the faces of the drama teachers sitting in the front row. Now, I want to assure you all that we are taking this matter very seriously, Mr. Simmons said, his tone suddenly more resolute. We have launched a full investigation, and I can assure you that anyone found to be responsible for these discrepancies will be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. Karen's grin widened as she watched the principal struggle to maintain his composure. She knew that the investigation would ultimately point the finger at Mr. Simmons himself, and the fallout would be catastrophic for the school. As the meeting wore on, Karen sat back and observed the chaos unfolding around her. The drama teachers were in a state of panic, desperately trying to defend their department and their reputations. Meanwhile, the parents in the audience were growing increasingly agitated, demanding answers and accountability. Finally, as the meeting drew to a close, Mr. Simmons stepped forward once again, his expression grim. In light of these developments, I'm afraid I have no choice but to suspend all extracurricular activities, including the drama department's upcoming production. Until we can get to the bottom of this situation, the school simply cannot afford to allocate any resources to these programs. The auditorium erupted in a cacophony of outrage, with parents and teachers alike shouting their protests. But Mr. Simmons held firm, his jaw set with determination. As the meeting adjourned, Karen slipped out of the auditorium, her heart racing with a twisted sense of satisfaction. She had done it. She had brought the school to its knees, and she had done it all in the name of her daughter. As she climbed into her car and drove away, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of victory. Sure, she had sacrificed her own reputation and the trust of her family in the process, but in her mind, the ends had more than justified the means. Brittany's dreams may have been crushed, but Karen's thirst for revenge had been quenched, and she knew that in the end, that was all that truly mattered.